The Kremlin reacted to the meeting between Putin and Trump. NATO Secretary General criticized Zelensky for his words about Scholz. Let's talk to Jakub Koreyba, a doctoral candidate in political science. Jakub, hello, good to see you. Trump has said Putin wants an early meeting with him to discuss the war. The newly elected president of the United States, Trump has said he may meet with Putin early in his presidency to negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine. He said that this is one of the tasks he wants to accomplish quickly, and that Putin is interested in the meeting. How should these statements be taken? Are there prerequisites for such a meeting, and what effect could it have? It is clear that Putin wants to meet because he has already lost the war. In strategic terms, the war is lost. Russia has not achieved any of its strategic goals. Those temporary occupation achievements, in terms of strategy, change nothing for Russia, especially since they are illegal for the rest of the world. But just as Russia once occupied the Baltic states, no one has recognized this. No one recognizes the Russian occupation of Ukrainian territory either. Thus, there are neither military achievements nor political chances to achieve any result. Obviously, if there is no result, Russian nationalists, whom Putin has been pitting against the whole world, will come out to Manechnaya Square and ask, "What did we fight for? We have no legs, arms, eyes. Where is the restoration of the Soviet Union? Where is the rising from the knees and the new empire?" Thus, the war has already been lost, and now Putin is closest to losing the peace. Russia's design is to become a troublemaker for the world without being able to realize positive plans. They say, communicate with Putin, otherwise you will feel bad. They haven't had any positive agenda for a long time, only a negative one. They threaten everyone. Talk to us, otherwise we will launch missiles at Kiev, use nutshell, or do something even worse. Right now, Putin is selling fear. He is trying to impose himself as a bad character on a global scale. Since he failed to become the resurrector of the empire, he sees his role as a global blackmailer who threatens everyone around him.
Воскресителем империи, он видит свою роль в таком роли мирового глобального рэкетера, который шантажирует всех вокруг.
Now, he's trying to apply this kind of blackmail to Trump. You won't talk to me. I'll ruin your presidency, your whole term, which should be the pinnacle of your career, with the slogan America Great Again. He's threatening to continually ruin every day of the presidency. Most importantly, Putin is going back to his roots. He came to power in Russia as a leader who begged America for attention, and ends up just as a man who is again begging America and other partners to pay attention to him. He says, "It's enough for you to talk to me, meet with me, and I'll be happy already."
Хватит, чтобы ты со мной встретился, и я уже буду счастлив. И мне этого достаточно. Я уже смогу всей своей черни на Москве показать, что я равен тебе. А моя пропаганда все уже...
This is enough for him to show in Moscow that he is Trump's equal. His propaganda will formalize everything as it should be, because the population has no other sources of information. For Putin, this is actually his last chance to stay in power. The war has not brought him what he needs to maintain his position.
Чтобы закрутить гайки в России, выдавить всех недовольных, убить
He started it solely to consolidate his power, to tighten the screws in Russia, to squeeze out all the dissatisfied, to destroy the active population, including the hyperactive patriots. He wanted to dispose of these people in war so they would not interfere with his rule. The plan was to stay with a passive-aggressive population processed by propaganda. But it failed. None of the goals he promised to the people have been accomplished. He has faced the real threat of losing power for the last 25 years. This threat comes not from the elites, but from the masses he turned against Ukraine by promising victory. Now he realizes that he has lost the war and risks losing the peace. Trump is the only one who can save his image right now, which he is accomplishing through blackmail. Here, if you don't support me, I'll be overthrown, killed, and Russia will be in nuclear chaos, a war of all against all. Your whole presidency, you'll be cleaning up the mess. Do you want that? This is roughly how one might imagine Putin's dialogue with Trump. The biggest danger is that indeed, because of their opportunistic aspirations, Trump and the American elite in general may go along with this deal. They may give Putin a chance to save face, as they say, in exchange for him stopping the blackmail. From America's point of view, that's not the worst way out, since America is far away. But from our point of view, from your point of view, it is a very bad way out because we will stay close to this aggressive neighbor. By the way, Mr. Sullivan, the national security advisor to the current president of the United States, has said that a peace agreement to end the war in Ukraine can be achieved through pressure on Russia. If we're talking about the present, do you see this pressure from the U.S., more specifically the White House right now? Will we see this pressure with the arrival of Donald Trump? And in what form will it be? From your point of view, this pressure should be exceptionally hard. Russians in general understand only force. I have spent a lot of time among them, including inside various elite structures, where the people who shape their policies are located.
Элитных, где где находятся люди, которые придумывают их политику.
Including educated people in Russia understand exclusively the language of force. This is a culture of violence, machista, primitive, tribal, with elements of tribalism. Before a Russian shows his strength, he doesn't consider you a partner in a discussion at all. You see how the Turks deal with them. The Russians consider them best friends and super constructive partners. The Chinese behave the same way, and the result is similar. If Trump wants to achieve something, he should first demonstrate strength and then start negotiations. So far, we see only the carrot. We do not see the stick with which the Russian negotiating position should be formed. This is still absent, perhaps being prepared. However, if Trump thinks that it is possible to talk to the Russians exclusively with the carrot, using rational, politically motivated proposals, he is deeply mistaken. This could be the biggest mistake of his political career. If he doesn't start using force in negotiations with the Russians, including symmetrical blackmail, he will lose and go down in history as the biggest loser as President of the United States. I don't think that is the purpose of his life, his political career, or his presidency. Putting pressure on Russia is easy now. They have exhausted resources and are isolated. The turn to the east has failed. And every day, Russia is becoming more and more a colony of China, which for the Russian elite is worse than being a colony of the United States or the West.
Этой войны они все больше и больше становятся колонией Китая, что, я так понимаю, гораздо хуже, в том числе с точки зрения российской элиты, чем быть колонией США или Запада.
And nothing terrible happened in those times when they were completely dependent on the West.
В те времена, когда они полностью зависели от Запада. Поэтому и в этом...
So it's potentially Trump's biggest mistake to give them time. The more he tolerates their great-powered hubris and attempts to appear to be something they are not, the worse America will look. Every day of concessions to Russia is a signal to all the anti-American forces in the world that this is the way to go.
Каждый день уступок России – это сигнал для всех антиамериканских сил в мире, что так можно. Если Трамп не надавит сейчас на Путина,
If Trump doesn't push Putin now, all anti-American forces will intensify, and he will have not one problem with Russia and not one war in Ukraine, but many similar conflicts around the world. How do you do that? Very simple. They have 1,000 tomahawks in the first salvo. If the Russians attack other countries, then we should respond symmetrically. I'm not calling for anything specific, and I don't know how much it corresponds to your legislation or ethics, but we in Poland know very well how to talk to them. Every time someone defeated them, they were silenced. In 1920, when we defeated them, when the Finns, Turks, and others did it. If America wants to throw the Russian problem off the agenda, it must act decisively. We should respond symmetrically. Since the Russians have already abrogated the principle of not using force to solve political problems, then we must work within the framework of the agenda that they themselves set. We have been telling them for many years, 20 years, that this is not the way to do it, but they did it anyway. They are much weaker than we are. The question is exclusively mental. It is a question of mental barriers. We have all the material forces and means to defeat, divide, and neutralize them. It is a question of a certain ethical and moral squeamishness of the American elite. They believe that this is not allowed, that it is ugly, that we live in a correct democratic world and should not act as these scoundrels do. The result of such a policy is that the weak use force and the strong do not use it. As a result, the strong become absurdly weaker than the weak. You do realize what opportunities there are now, don't you? Do you realize that 4 or 5 neighboring countries of Russia will be enough to solve this problem once and for all? All it takes is for Trump to say yes. We in Poland and Russia's other neighbors know very well what forces and means should be used. What is lacking is political will in America. They are afraid that when Russia collapses, there will be more problems than there are now. In fact, there will be a period of turbulence, but then everything will be fine. When it gets to Trump and his allies, I hope they choose the only right approach. So far, we see attempts to talk to the Russians as a rational partner, which they are not. The big plus of the whole situation is that the Russians themselves are incapable. They will sooner or later prove to Trump themselves that it is impossible to negotiate with them, that only brute, naked, direct physical force works with them. Jakub, you are absolutely 100% correct. While Russia is blackmailing and launching missiles at Ukraine, blackmailing the whole world with nuclear weapons, Ukraine has been hanging in there for almost 3 years now. It is fighting alone, standing up to Russia. Imagine if a coalition of several countries were fighting Russia. I'm not talking about the whole NATO or the whole West, but a few countries with good Western weapons, morality, and determination. Then we could end this problem once and for all. End 300 years of Russia's imperial history.
И решимостью в отношении русских, которые у нас есть, с той надеждой на то, чтобы с этой проблемой покончить раз и навсегда, вот закончить 300 лет имперского периода истории России.
All that is lacking is the resolve of the United States, which is the most powerful nation in the world and on which our foreign policy depends, including who we can and can't go to war with. There is a certain hierarchy in the world. They are more important, stronger, richer. They can tell us yes or no. Such is the reality of our world we live in. Their leadership depends on their position on the Ukrainian issue. If they don't bring Ukraine to victory, that will be the end of it. American leadership and the complete compromise of the United States. This is not the Korean scenario, the Vietnam scenario, the Afghan scenario, or the Iraqi scenario. Putin, on the other hand, doesn't care about certain territories. He realizes that he is a primitive, uneducated man, but he realizes that this or that region of Ukraine has no value from a strategic point of view. By occupying, by attacking Ukraine, he is destroying the American order. When the Americans realize that this is exactly about their leadership, their position, then this war will enter a new victorious phase for us. As long as they don't realize this, as long as they think that they can choose their opponents, that first China, then Russia, or we'll see, they will lose. Americans are very powerful, rich, and influential, but they are not geniuses. I talked to so many American colleagues, including Fiona Hill, who was Trump's Russia advisor. I understand how they think. These are great people, but they are not geniuses. They don't understand a lot of things either. They need time to paint a real picture of the world for themselves. People are imperfect, including our powerful, influential American friends. The question is that this is also a moment of truth for them. If they don't let Ukraine lose, if they keep forcing Ukraine to go to war with one hand behind its back, they will lose themselves. I guess I see this period as a preparation for change.
Украине проиграть, если они будут и впредь заставлять Украину воевать с одной рукой за спиной, то они сами проиграют. Я думаю, я вижу вот этот период как...
Trump realizes that he needs to consolidate his power within America. And yes, it's true, because half of America and 80% of the elite are against him. Then from a strengthened position, we can enter another phase of the war, a phase in which Ukraine will not only regain its border, but will be able to kick Russia out of Europe for good. Jakub, at a time when we need to apply pressure on Russia, on Putin, the Russian terrorist, we see Fico going to Moscow. Don't joke. Please don't joke. Fico is a joke. I'm fine with the Slovak people. They are good, our brothers and neighbors. But you understand that Fico is a crook and a thief. He is a man who means nothing. What he does doesn't matter at all. Slovakia is a beautiful country, but it is not a force that defines something in Europe. It is a private initiative of a crooked populist who wants to earn himself some avoirs, some assets. This is, they're thieves' squabbles. A small thief goes to the big thief because he realizes that the big thief is in a bad situation and can get something from him. Let's not fall for it being accepted at all. You see, Russia and Slovakia are different things. If you watch Russian propaganda, you will see that Slovakia is now seen as the country that will change the position of Europe and the world towards Russia. If the Russians are presenting it that way, then they are really in great despair. So let's not behave in this way. Slovakia is not a country that we can talk about in the context of political decisions. I wanted to quote the Slovak opposition, or rather, the opposition Freedom and Solidarity Party. It criticized Prime Minister Fico's meeting with Russian dictator Putin, calling the talks a betrayal of the country and allies. The statement was published on the party's website, and they wrote that Robert Fico is a disgrace to Slovakia by negotiating with Putin. This is a betrayal not only of our country, but also of our allies, the EU and NATO. Robert Fico is behaving as a collaborator, not as the head of a sovereign country. These are the words and facts that I do not want to hide. I do not want to offend our Slovak brothers, neighbors, and allies, but unfortunately they have a tradition of collaborationism. If they behave like that, we will remind them of it. The good thing is that what Fico does or does not do has no influence on European and free world policy towards Russia. But the Slovak people will have to answer for it. If they allow this mafia that runs their country to use the name of their country and people for such things, we will remind them of that. If I were a country like Slovakia, if I were the Slovak people, I would think 5 times. You and I have talked about the potential meeting between Trump and Putin, and we also reminisced a little bit about Putin and Fico and the next trip that may take place. Still in question, but I'm sure you've seen the information that German Chancellor Scholz is preparing to travel to Moscow to strengthen his position. Let him go, let him stay there. This is the scoundrel in the history of European politics since I don't know who. I don't want to throw big words around, but let them keep him. This is a man who has harmed Germany, the German people, Ukraine, Poland, Europe, and all of us with his incompetence, myopia, and stupidity.
Не хочу уже даже бросаться именами. Пусть они там его оставят. Себе там его оставят. Это человек, который навредил Германии, немецкому народу, Украине, Польше, Европе и всем нам своей некомпетентностью, своей близорукостью.
He's done more damage than anyone in the last 30 years. If he's going there, let him stay there. Maybe apply for Gazprom or Rosneft like some of his former party colleagues. That whole socialist party in Germany. I don't want to use bad words, but Christmas is coming, not the kind of humor we need for these holidays. But Olaf Scholz is exactly the kind of person who should not be in European politics.
Не такой юмор нам нужен на эти праздники, но вот Олаф Шольц — это именно тот человек, которого не должно быть в европейской политике.
Jakub, if it weren't for Olaf Scholz, the line of contact, the front line would be in a completely different place, many kilometers east of the present one. We see the history with the Taurus. When it is not that there is an agreement to hit the territory of the Russian Federation, there is not even an agreement to transfer this armament to us. When Poland gave Ukraine 300 tanks, a tank division, at great risk to us, because it was the period when our troops were left without equipment, they sent helmets and some kind of first aid kits, medical kits, although the German economy could have provided the army with anything. If they have not done so, it is precisely because of the political decisions of Olaf Scholz, who will go down in German and European history as a disgrace to Germany. The next chancellor, judging by what my friends in the CDU, from the Christian Democratic Party, from which the next chancellor is likely to come, will have to launder this disgrace for many years.
Из христианско-демократической партии, из которой, скорее всего, следующий канцлер будет, должна будет отмывать.
I hope that they will have time to compensate, including through the supply of weapons, for all the mistakes that Olaf Scholz made. The sooner this man is gone, the better. Jakub, if we are talking about Scholz, about the elections, by the way, this is a great lesson. If I may, my personal opinion, I try never to comment on internal Ukrainian politics. And never criticize this or that Ukrainian politicians. But this is a huge, big lesson for the whole pro-German party in Ukrainian politics. In the Ukrainian media space, guys, here's Scholz helped you. You're Scholz. We have to think next time. And here's German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius in an interview with the media group Funky about the hybrid threat from the Russian Federation. It was there all the time, but he warned that, again, Putin knows Germany well. The country, according to Pistorius, remains Putin's focus. He said ignoring the threat because of discomfort will only make it worse. He notes that this is part of Putin's strategy to destabilize and divide German society, given that examples of the Russian Federation's hybrid aggression include sabotage in the North and Baltic Seas and violations of airspace by Russian aircraft. And not only before the elections in Germany, how Russia can show itself, how it is already showing itself, and how it will affect Ukraine. You have already partly said this, but I would like to ask for your opinion. If we are talking about the German elections, it is clear that the strategic fiasco on the fronts, the fact that the Russians failed to achieve any of their military objectives in Ukraine, will be compensated for by hybrid operations. Now, the active phase of the current stage of the war will soon be over. It is clear that all these people will have to be given work, not only so that they don't go and overthrow the government, but to give them some hope. To pretend that Putin pretended that, guys, I haven't finished anything. Everything is just beginning. Now we will just work in a different way. We will achieve the same goals by subversive methods. We will ruin, destabilize Europe with the help of subversive acts. And this they will do. Now there will be more Russian sabotage in Europe than ever before.
И это они будут делать сейчас. Русской диверсии в Европе будет больше, чем когда-либо. Они сейчас уже
They have already begun to make up for their failures on the fronts by subversion.
компенсировать свои неудачи на фронтах.
We see this in Poland. Strange fires, accidents, trains going off the tracks, different buildings burning. But we are not scared, because we are ready for it. We are used to it. We understand who our neighbor is. We realize there's a psychopath living near our house. The Germans saw the Russians as some kind of constructive partner, a civilized state and a rational negotiator who could be persuaded to do something. For example, not to blow up buildings, not to kill people in the Tiergarten in the center of Berlin, not to bribe politicians, and so on. All this is about to happen, the wave of anxiety that awaits Germany. On the one hand, the migrants who have been set upon with the help of drugs and extremist ideology, and on the other hand, neo-Nazis, also fueled by Russian money, will clash in Germany. There will be a lot of bloodshed, but it must be said that the Germans themselves wanted it. For many years, they did not notice that Russians in their country plant, organize, and inspire all kinds of extremist forces. Germany has to go through this purgatory, but I am sure that there are still sensible forces there that will be able to deal with left and right-wing extremism.
Я уверен, что там есть все-таки здравые силы, которые и с левым, и с правым экстремизмом смогут разобраться. А сейчас остановить эту волну уже невозможно. Вот все приказы в Москве уже даны.
Now it is impossible to stop this wave. All the orders in Moscow have already been given. There is a line to bring the situation in Germany almost to a civil war. They failed to instigate a civil war in Ukraine, and now they have shifted all their forces to Germany. The result of these elections will show how successful Russia can be in this plan. I think not very much, because, as always, the Russians stole half the money. The funds were misused, yet Moscow financed.
Но, тем не менее, там же по инерции работают все эти организации, партии, политики, которые многими годами финансировались и организовывались.
Organizations and politicians continue operating. We've repeatedly said this must stop. In Poland, we either imprisoned or deported them, and now we don't face this issue. Germany has such a problem because Germans have been either naive or greedy or both. Now they will have to deal with the problem they have allowed to grow within their own country. Jakub, more on another meeting that may take place soon. Alexander Lukashenko has announced an imminent meeting with Vladimir Putin, a terrorist, and a visit to China, Balta reports. What could be the purpose of this mini-tour? Could Lukashenko pass something from Putin to Xi Jinping, as Medvedev recently did? Look, I've had a good opinion of Lukashenko as a politician for a long time. Of course, he is a scoundrel, a criminal, a murderer, but no one has deceived Putin as beautifully as Lukashenko. That is his plus point. He knew how to do it and knows how to do it. Since the man did not catch the moment, he cornered himself. He realizes he's next. He realizes that since Putin's stated purpose for Russia's existence and his power in the system is to restore the Soviet Union, he's going to try to do something that resembles the restoration of the Soviet Union. Occupy Ukraine failed. What Putin has seized is not much like restoring the Soviet Union. So it will compensate somewhere else. In the Baltic states, it is unrealistic, because NATO will not allow it. In Kazakhstan, China will not allow it. In the South Caucasus, in Azerbaijan, Turkey will not allow it. So what does Putin have left? What will he seize, occupy, incorporate, show as a new Soviet Union? There is a single territory, defenseless, isolated, without an army or outside support. You know what kind of army Belarus has. You know the number 17,500 on Soviet equipment. You understand that this is 2 weeks and also an army that will not defend Usatov. So he realizes very well that he is next and that Putin has a huge chance to seize and occupy Belarus. For that, he needs to kill Lukashenko, which is happening now. So Lukashenko goes to China to gain support against Russia. He goes to beg the Chinese to protect him from Putin. Поэтому в Китай Лукашенко едет заручиться поддержкой против России. Лукашенко едет умолять китайцев защитить его от Путина. Jakub, in 2022 you said that yesterday it was Georgia, today it is Ukraine, and tomorrow it is Poland. Because the Russian mentality, as Lech Kaczynski pointed out in 2008, does not change. It is impossible to reform Russia. It can only be defeated. Now there is a chance. There is a country ready to do it, and Ukrainians should be supported. Compromise with Russia will be tactical, and its strategic plans have not changed for 300 years. We very much believe in this support. I thank you for this conversation, for your support for Ukraine, and for the words that you said. What do the Russians want? They want to repeat Munich. Austria is Belarus, Czechoslovakia is Ukraine, and Poland is Poland. That's how they see the situation. If we allow all this to happen, we lose.
Так они видят ситуацию. Вот если мы все это допустим, мы проиграем, а еще и все
And
это
if we give it all to them for free at a time when we can actually defeat them, it will be a disaster. The Russians have not been able to achieve anything. Look, nothing. And only Ukraine is fighting against them, and that with one hand tied behind its back. Imagine if we all mobilize to win. It's all real. They have achieved nothing and will not achieve anything. The main thing is not to let themselves be deceived. Jakub, thank you for the right messages. Jakub Koreyba, Doctor of Political Science. Don't forget to subscribe to Channel 24's YouTube channel and write comments. We wish you a good, peaceful day and see you later.